I think this is a very significant announcement for defence. There is a lot of heat generated in relation to what the numbers mean. I don't think the government did itself many favours by how it presented the numbers, and the more numbers they gave us, the more confused I think many readers were, particularly when, on the one hand, the government told us there was 75 billion extra money, but then they told us that actually it was only equivalent to 4.5 billion a year in 2028, so we didn't actually have to make many other savings to pay for it. There was a lot of confusion, I think, in the messaging there. But if you dig into it, it's still quite significant that the UK government is now committed to spending 2.5% GDP on defence by 2030 and to build steadily to that level over the next 6 years, so not simply backloading it, which would be a typical Treasury trick. So I think that is significant. It's also, I think, very significant that the government has committed to spending £3 billion on Ukraine every year for as long as it takes. None of us know how long it will take. At some stage, this war will come to an end and maybe Ukraine will have fewer military requirements, or Ukraine will lose, in which case it will be irrelevant. But that's a very significant commitment, because up to now, the UK has been drip feeding annual allocations to Ukraine. The UK has done a lot for Ukraine, but I think unnecessary uncertainty has been created because the Treasury hasn't been willing to promise very far in advance on that. So that's a big step forward. But its main effect, I think, will to be add some increased certainty to the forces and to defence suppliers as to the prospects of spending in future, so you can sign longer term contracts. For example, in relation to munitions, the issue isn't so much how many shells or missiles or whatever you order now. It's if companies are being asked to set up new factories to produce munitions, then they need more than 1 or 2 years of orders, need a prospect of orders going into the very long term, and this will help very much in that regard. One of the things that hasn't been highlighted much, but I think will become increasingly important, is finance for Ukraine's own defence industry. The Ukrainian government needs money so that it can buy weapons and systems from its own defence companies, who are often best placed to adapt rapidly to the changing nature of the Russian threat. So I hope there's an element in here which is financing Ukraine defence companies as well as British defence companies, and indeed buying on the international market. Big question about how much of this money will go into personnel. My view is it's pretty unlikely that this will translate into an increase in personnel, service personnel numbers, but there may be some money, there needs to be more money spent on improving the pay and conditions of our service personnel, because the problems of recruitment and retention are getting worse, and without investment in our people, we're simply not going to be able to use the great equipment that is coming online as effectively as we need to. I think for the last couple of years, having got off to a really great start at the beginning of the war in terms of the UK being ahead of the pack in helping Ukraine and the sort of equipment we provided and so on, in financial terms, we've fallen behind. We've fallen behind Germany. Germany is by far the biggest supplier of military aid to Ukraine in monetary terms. We've fallen behind Scandinavia. The countries of Scandinavia in total provide more military assistance to Ukraine than we do. And before this announcement, our assistance had flatlined in total. And that was also true of our core defence budget. The UK's core defence budget over the last 2 years in real terms has not increased, which is quite remarkable given what's happened over the last 2 years. So this is, I think, implicit recognition that didn't make sense, and it's a commitment by the government now to do more. And I think that will, be very welcome in other European capitals. It's already been welcomed by Secretary General of NATO, by the German Chancellor, and by others, that the UK is prepared to continue to pull its weight in European defence. There's been a long period in which the UK was able to say, we reached 2%, it's time for everybody else to catch up. Well, most Europeans have now caught up on 2%. And that's why I think the government's been under quite a lot of pressure, actually, from European allies more than the Americans, to say, guys, the UK, you say you're leading in NATO, well, put your money where your mouth is in that regard. And I think this is a step in that direction.